The notice was taped crookedly to the front door. Final warning. Violation pending fine. Angela Brooks stood on her porch longer than she needed to, rereading the same 3 sentences while the morning sun crept higher. The paper fluttered slightly in the breeze like it was impatient with her. Angela, black, late 30s, systems analyst by trade, organised by necessity, had lived in Maple Ridge Estates for 4 years. Long enough to know the rules, long enough to know when something didn't add up. She peeled the notice off the door and read the fine print. Unauthorised exterior modification. Failure to comply will result in daily fines. Angela looked up at her townhouse. Same beige siding, same approved porch light, same flower pots she'd submitted for approval last spring and received written confirmation for. Nothing had changed. Inside, she set the notice on the kitchen table and opened her laptop. The sender was listed at the bottom in neat block letters. HOA President, Richard Halverson. Angela exhaled slowly. Richard, white, early 60s, retired self-appointed authority, had been HOA president for as long as anyone could remember. He loved rules the way some people loved hobbies. Not for order, exactly, for leverage. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Please call me regarding the violation notice. Angela stared at the message, then typed back. Please email details of the alleged violation. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. This can be resolved quickly by phone. Angela didn't respond. Instead, she clicked into her email and searched a familiar folder. HOA Approvals. There it was. Approved. Porch Planters, April 12th, 2024. From HOA Board. Angela attached the email to a reply. I'm requesting clarification. These planters were approved in writing. Please confirm why fines are being threatened. She hit send. 10 minutes later, another email arrived. From Richard Halverson. Subject: Compliance required. Ms. Brooks, approvals can be revisited. The board reserves the right to enforce standards at any time. Failure to remove the unapproved items by Friday will result in fines. Angela read it twice, then once more. Approvals can be revisited. She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes briefly, not in frustration, but in calculation, because she remembered something Richard clearly hadn't. 2 years ago, after a dispute with another homeowner, the HOA had quietly implemented a rule. All official HOA decisions must be documented and archived via community email. No verbal overrides. No retroactive enforcement without notice. It had been sent out in a long, boring email most residents ignored. Angela hadn't. She opened a new tab and logged into the HOA portal. Community Email Archive. She typed Richard's name into the search bar, and as the results began to load, threads, approvals, clarifications, board votes, Angela felt the balance shift. Because Richard thought he was threatening fines, but what he'd really done was invite her to open the one place where his authority only existed if the record agreed with him. And the archive, it remembered everything. Angela scrolled slowly, not because the archive was hard to navigate, but because she wanted to be precise. Thread after thread appeared on the screen, each neatly time-stamped and labelled. Landscaping approvals, exterior lighting clarification, board vote summaries, years of HOA correspondence preserved in the bland bureaucratic tone people used when they assumed no one would ever read it closely. She clicked the first result. Subject: Clarification on approved exterior modifications from Richard Halverson. Date: March 3rd, 2023. Angela skimmed until her eyes caught the sentence she'd been looking for. Once written approval has been granted by the board, residents may rely on that approval unless standards are formally amended with notice. She didn't smile. She kept reading. Another email, another clarification. Another board response, This one from the Vice President, explicitly stating that individual board members could not unilaterally revoke prior approvals. Angela opened her calendar and checked the date of her planter approval. April 12, 2024. She cross-referenced it with the Standards Amendment log. No changes since January. Angela sat back in her chair. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a threat issued with the assumption that she wouldn't challenge it. Her phone buzzed again. "Richard, please remove the planters today. We're trying to be reasonable." Angela exhaled slowly and typed her reply. "Before any action is taken, please confirm whether the board has voted to revoke my April 12th approval. If so, please provide the amendment notice and vote record as required under Section 4.2. She hit send. This time, the reply didn't come immediately. Angela took a sip of coffee and watched the sunlight move across the kitchen floor. She thought about the neighbour across the street, an older woman who'd quietly paid fines for months rather than fight them, about the family 2 units down who'd repainted their shutters twice because Richard didn't like the shade. She thought about how often HOA rules were treated like weather, unavoidable, impersonal, impossible to reason with. But weather didn't send emails. People did. Her inbox chimed. From Richard Halverson. "The board does not need to vote on every enforcement action. As president, I have authority to act in the community's best interest." Angela stared at the sentence. Then she copied it. She opened a new email. Recipients, HOA Board. All members. Subject, clarification. Requested, enforcement authority and prior approvals. She pasted Richard's line into the body of the email and added one sentence of her own. "Please confirm whether this reflects current board policy, given the documented approval and existing archive guidance." She attached 3 emails from the archive, and then she sent it. The quiet that followed wasn't empty, it was charged, because Richard had just put his authority in writing, and Angela had placed it exactly where it couldn't hide. The archive wasn't just a record, it was about to become a witness. The reply all came faster than Angela expected, not from Richard, from Elaine Porter, the HOA Vice President. "I'm reviewing the documents now," the email read. "Please pause any enforcement action until this is clarified." Angela felt a subtle release in her shoulders. Not relief, momentum. Within minutes, another board member chimed in, then another. Short replies at first. Cautious, procedural. Richard didn't respond. Angela refreshed the page and kept the archive open in a second tab. She followed the thread as it grew, watching the tone shift from neutral to pointed. "Do we have a record of a standards amendment? I don't see a vote to revoke prior approvals. We can't retroactively fine without notice." Angela said nothing. She didn't add commentary. She didn't explain. She let the emails do what they were designed to do when people actually read them, connect the dots. Finally, Richard replied. "This is being blown out of proportion," he wrote. "We've always exercised discretion to maintain community standards." Elaine answered within 2 minutes. "Discretion does not override written approvals or documented policy. The archive is clear on this." Another board member added, "If we proceed with fines despite the record, we expose the HOA to liability." That word, liability, changed the temperature of the conversation. Angela leaned back and waited. 10 minutes later, a new message appeared. Subject, emergency board call, 6 p.m. Today, Angela closed her laptop and looked out the window at her porch. The planters sat exactly where they'd always been. Quiet. Approved. Unchanged. At 6 o'clock, the board call began. Angela joined on mute at first, listening as Richard spoke. His voice was firmer than his emails, but less confident than it had been that morning. "This is about consistency," he said. "If we don't enforce standards uniformly, we invite chaos." Elaine responded evenly. "Uniform enforcement requires uniform process." Another board member cleared his throat. "Richard, did you issue the violation notice without a board vote?" A pause. I acted as president, Richard said, within my authority. Elaine didn't raise her voice. The archive says otherwise. She read aloud the same sentence Angela had found earlier, the one Richard himself had written 2 years ago about written approvals standing unless standards were amended with notice. The line echoed in the call, stripped of context and tone, just words. His words. No one spoke for a moment. Then the treasurer said, "If we fine Ms. Brooks after documented approval, she could contest it and win." Another pause. Richard sighed. "Fine, we'll withdraw the notice." Elaine replied, "Not just withdraw, we need to acknowledge the error. And we need to address how this happened." Angela unmuted for the first time. "I agree," she said calmly, "because this isn't just about my planters." The line went quiet again. "I followed the rules," Angela continued. "I documented everything because I was told documentation mattered. When I was threatened with fines anyway, I used the archive you told us to trust." She paused. "If approvals can be ignored without notice, then no one here has security." "Not really." Elaine spoke next. "Thank you, Angela." Richard didn't respond. The call ended with a decision. The notice would be formally rescinded, no fines issued, and the board would review enforcement procedures at the next open meeting. Angela ended the call and closed her laptop. Outside, the porch light clicked on as the sun dipped lower. The planters didn't move. They didn't need to. The threat had already collapsed under its own record, and for the first time since the notice appeared on her door, Angela knew something important. The rules hadn't protected her. The archive had. The official email arrived the next morning. Not from Richard, from the HOA board's shared address. Subject: Correction and Policy Clarification. Angela read it slowly, line by line, the way she always did when something finally mattered. The violation notice had been issued in error. No fines would be assessed. The prior written approval dated April 12, 2024 remained valid. There was a final paragraph too, carefully worded, unmistakably intentional. The board recognizes the importance of adhering to documented approvals and established communication procedures. Enforcement actions will not override written records without formal amendment and notice. Angela closed her laptop and sat quietly for a moment. It wasn't an apology, but it was an admission. Later that afternoon, Richard appeared on her porch. Angela saw him through the window first, standing stiffly, holding a folder, expression controlled but strained. She took a breath and opened the door. "Ms. Brooks," he said, "I wanted to speak with you directly." Angela stepped aside slightly, but didn't invite him in. "You can say it here." He nodded. The board decided to rescind the notice. "I know," Angela replied. "I read the email." Richard adjusted the folder in his hands. "I was trying to keep standards consistent." Angela met his eyes. "Consistency isn't threatening fines without process." He exhaled. "I may have acted too quickly." Angela didn't respond right away. She looked past him at the street. Identical townhouses, identical porches, small variations that people cared about far more than they admitted. "People here trust the system because they think it's neutral," she said finally. "When it's not, documentation is all they have." Richard shifted. "I didn't intend." "I know what you intended," Angela interrupted gently. "I also know what you did." The difference mattered. Richard nodded once. "The board is reviewing enforcement authority." "That's good," Angela said. He hesitated. "I hope this doesn't affect how you feel about the community." Angela considered the question carefully. "It depends on what the community learns from this." Richard had no answer for that. He thanked her for her time and left, walking down the path a little more slowly than he'd arrived. That evening, Angela attended the open HOA meeting. She didn't speak first. She listened. Residents raised small issues at first: parking confusion, trash pickup delays. Then someone mentioned fines. Another asked about approval reversals. The conversation changed. Angela raised her hand when invited. "I want to thank the board for correcting the violation," she said. "But I also want to say this. Many people don't have the time or confidence to dig through archives or challenge notices." Heads nodded around the room. "If approvals can be undone quietly," she continued, "then the rules don't protect us. They pressure us." Elaine spoke next. "We're proposing a policy change. Automatic archive links included in all violation notices." Murmurs of approval followed. Angela sat back, heart steady. In the weeks that followed, the changes became real. Violation notices included references. Enforcement required recorded votes. Verbal instructions were replaced with written follow-ups. The archive stopped being a threat and started being a shield. One afternoon, Angela noticed a neighbor across the street smiling as she watered her plants. The same plants she'd once worried might be non-compliant. "You hear about the new HOA rules?" the neighbor called out. Angela smiled. "I did." That night, Angela sat on her porch as the sky darkened, the planters glowing softly in the porch light. They hadn't moved an inch, but the ground beneath them had. The threat of fines had ended not with shouting or defiance, but with timestamps, threads and records that refused to forget. And in a community built on rules, that memory had finally become something everyone could rely on.